Hello, everyone. Here we are for week 7 of the power rankings for VDL-V Create Season 7. With me here is Matrix. Say hi, Matrix.
Yo guys, how's it going?
So, with that, I guess we can start in what happened at week 7. So, starting off, we can see that the first match was the Rolled Gold Pretzels versus the Alexandria Arcanines, and the Arcanines were able to get a 2-1 win. I guess I'll start. This match was a very interesting match. Um, So game one, the Arcanines were able to get a Thunder Wave into a Nihilego of on the Pretzel side. I think on turn 1 or 2, and I think it ended up getting 3 or 4 full paralyses.
It was like three back to back.
Yeah, back to back paralyses. In addition, the Nihilego was choice scarfed, and so it never actually revealed it was choice scarf. However, at some point, I think it was able to get a dazzling gleam off, and um, the Pokemon in the back, which was the Aegislash, was able to come in and kind of clean up the Dragapult on the Arcanine side, and the oh my gosh, the monkey, the fighting monkey,
Persimmon.
Passimian, yeah, uh, in the back. It actually ended up being incredibly close. It kind of came down to, I think, a read where the Pretzels protected a Clefable or Clefairy in front of the Dragapult, and the Dragapult iron-headed it. However, I think it was a
Sealed.
very safe pretty safe read given that Dragapult's only ghost move was Phantom Force, which is over 2 turns, and then they could follow me the following turn if they did that.
Yeah.
Game two, I think we kind of ended up um, getting in this weird situation where the Pretzels did not properly EV train their Nihilego, and it undersped the Dragapult even though it was choice scarfed, and kind of led to some awkward situations.
Mhm.
However, I think the Arcanines were kind of adjusted well and kind of pressured pretty well in that game too. Um, and then game three, I think.
I will say,
Yep.
just go back to game two, I think they also had the Aegislash on the train. So they had no EVs on the Aegislash. And it came down to the fact that at the end of game two, Blacephalon versus Clefairy and Aegislash.
Oh yes.
Blacephalon was at +1 with a life orb, and Aegislash had the was in shield mode and had the friend guard boost. And the heat wave from Blacephalon, if the if the Aegislash had got the EV spread it was intended to have, 252 force SPDF, then it had like a 25% chance of surviving that heat wave there,
I
which would have been huge for the game, but
I think it was the other way
it just
around. I think it was 25% chance to kill, actually.
Ah, yeah, sorry, I meant to say 25. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, so definitely yeah. So I was, for some reason, I was thinking that was game three, but yeah, that was game two. Yeah, so game two came down to basically a kind of a miss EV on on the Pretzels, and if they did EV properly, it would have been come down to a roll, which would have been slightly in favor of the Pretzels. And
Mhm.
then I guess you could talk about game three.
So game three, I feel like Gumi decided to completely swap it around and bring the only 4 mons he actually had EVs on.
Mm-hmm.
So he brought the Clefairy, Noivern, Sharpedo, and Swampert. And he actually got into a decent position. Like the Sharpedo was pretty dominant for the entire set. Even though he'd already taken a hit with pretty low health, he did very good at a good job of protecting, redirecting, reading when he was going to get hit. Put some real good pressure on with some close combats and stuff. I feel like it was just towards the end of the game where Sharpedo went for a crunch into the NDD male to get the KO, and I think a close combat would have been the safer call, unless you're worried about an ally switch Dragapult, which I don't think you would be at that point. But if you went for the close combat into the Indeedee male, that's a guaranteed KO on the Lipard if it switches in, and also guaranteed KO on the Indeedee male. So going for the crunch there, Dan was able to swap in the Lipard, survive another turn with it, and put some more pressure on. And then having Swampert in the back over the Aegislash, um, which I think if Slash was in the back, it would have been a lot stronger game as well um, for Gumi because the Indeed Mail was rocking that energy ball.
Well, yeah, and I think even if it was Nilego, it also might have been able to get there as well.
Nilego as well.
But because it was Swampert in the back instead of either of those, I think it kind of put them in a situation where they ended up losing. Obviously, even with no EVs, they might have been able to win if one of them was in the back. But obviously, I understand why not. You didn't bring a Pokemon that was not EV trained.
Yeah.
But it was an incredibly close set, and definitely some very good plays on the Arcanine, some very good reads and plays on the Pretzel side. But I think basically kind of the game 3 play was kind of the big play that kind of decided the set, which was the switch out into Liepard and the Pretzels going for crunch instead of close combat.
Yeah.
So anything else before we move on?
No, that's basically, we've summarized that game up pretty well.
Okay. So with that, we can go on to the next match, which is the Bulky Dragons versus the Miss Magical Marauders. The Marauders were able to get a 2-0 win against the Dragons, which was a huge win for the fight for the second seed in that division. It was a very impressive game. It was probably one of the closest 2-0s I've ever seen. Both the games came down to an end game where I think the game 1, the Marauders had, I think, maybe like 10 HP on their Pokemon, and then game 2, I think they had like 12 HP on their Pokemon.
Yeah, Metagross in game 1 and Haunter in game 2.
Yeah, exactly. So what was I gonna say? So yeah, so it was an incredibly close set. The Marauders had some interesting tech. They had a Assault Vest special Metagross, which ended up doing a lot of work. In addition to that, the Haunter or the Gengar ended up having a Destiny Bond.
Yes,
Focus Sash. Yeah,
I took the Morgram down.
Yeah, Focus Sash Destiny Bond, and the Marauders made a good decision to not kill the Metagross with a Sucker Punch that they had the opportunity to, and instead killed it with the Morgram, and the Morgram died, which was a very nice play in that situation, even though I don't think they were necessarily calling the Destiny Bond play. The Heatmore, which was one of the MVPs of last season, ended up doing a lot of work this week. Its Flare Blitz and Sucker Punch damage was incredibly impressive. I believe it was Life Orbed, and it was kind of this also like this really reasonable speed tier where it kind of was pretty good in Trick Room, and they were able to kind of get it. The Marauders were able to get in Trick Room in a certain point of game 2, I believe, and had a pretty good position. And then game 2, I think, ended up coming down to basically Haunter versus Piloswine in game, where the Haunter was able to burn the Piloswine, and then it would Hex to do a bunch of damage and was able to kind of squeak it out. But it was incredibly close. I think game 1 was Klefki versus Metagross, and Metagross was at like 40, maybe 60 HP. And
it was very low, and the Klefki was having to go for like Flash Cannon or something.
Yeah, exactly. The Flash had to go
Dazzling Gleam.
Yeah, it's Dazzling Gleam, and the Metagross is going through Flash Cannon through Light Screen. And basically the Klefki had to start at starting at max HP, and so it was an incredibly close situation, and it was really well played and nail-biter the entire way. At no point I felt comfortable guessing who was going to win either of those games. So any other thoughts on the set?
No, that's everything that I can think of.
Sounds good. So with that, we can move on to, I guess, my match, which I played against Baltimore Pangorials, and I lost 1-2, or they won 2-0, or 2-1, I mean. So I guess I'll start since I played this. So this was a really important match for me, and this was kind of the Pangorials' chance to lock up first seed, and they're in our division. And so it was kind of a big match for both of us. And game 1, I think, went very well. I kind of predicted one of their leads, and they kind of led exactly what I was expecting, and I kind of punished them pretty well for it because they weren't really expecting multi-scale on my Dragonite. And then other than that, I I think it was a pretty clean game for me. Game two, I kind of decided to switch up my lead, and um, I switched up my lead to Choice Guard Thunderous and Crobat, and they ended up doing the worst case scenario lead for me. With the lead I decided to choose, I should have, and then I kind of went in the situation where I just kept Thunderous in for 3 turns. It did no damage and did literally nothing. And if I would have switched out at any point, I think I would have been in a very good position. And then the game, in my opinion, kind of came down to a flinch with Zing Zap into my Skarmory. I don't know if 100% would have gone my way otherwise, but the game was basically lost at that point because the flinch went from me having it being a 3-3 Pokemon tie to me being down to a 4-2 lead based because of Zing Zap flinch. And then game 3 ended up being really close, in which it was very much back and forth. The Baltimore Pangoroils made a lot of good switches, and I think at some point I decided to Earth Power into a Togedemaru, and they switched out into the Aerodactyl. And if I would have read the switch, I think I get a clean win. But instead, the switch ends up putting them in a situation where we get into the tight end game where I just need them to miss a rock slide and I win, and they hit the rock slide and I lost.
But they were Wideland.
They were Wideland, so it was incredibly likely that they would hit the rock slide.
99% accurate rock slides.
No, they did the double connect, so it's like 97% chance.
True.
But yeah, so definitely ended up being a really close set. I definitely don't think I played the cleanest, and the Pangorials played very well. And so, but I definitely think I was happy with my prep, and I think I think I could have gotten there, but sadly did not. Any thoughts on the set?
I think you touched upon pretty much everything. Like as you say, game 2 possibly not changing the leads up was probably to your detriment, and then game 3 it was really sad to watch because it was very clear like the Togedemaru could easily switch out there into the Aerodactyl, and as you say, if you've gone for that rock slide there, the Landorus, I think you definitely would have took the game. Well played by the Panda though. It was really good set.
Oh yes, and I forgot the turn 2 flinch on my Dragonite, which prevented me from killing Togedemaru, which ended up letting it save in the back, which ended up being the cause of them winning in the end. That I forgot about that, but that one was somewhat likely. It was slightly in their favor since I got hit with a Zing Zap and a Rock Slide, but the turn 2 flinch was also really bad. Yeah. It was kind of this really awkward situation where my Dragonite was multi-scale instead of inner focus in order to survive ice coverage. However, I got flinched the flinch on it multiple times was a really big issue. And so kind of been in this weird situation where it's like, I don't, it's hard to say whether or not, it's hard to say which one's optimal because I couldn't run like Yachi Berry because of the Unnerve on the Aerodactyl, which did a lot of work.
Yeah.
Anyways, I guess we can move on to your match, which
my match
against Welsh Royalers versus Rebellion. Rebellion won 2-1. I'll let you talk about this.
Did they though? No, I mean there's it's getting tiring. Keep repeating actually. So there's been.
I can talk about it if you want.
This match has been hotly talked about all week, to be honest. Well, I say all week. It was a delayed match, and yeah, it's still being talked about into this week 8. The game 1 went really well for myself. Like I got Miltank set up really nicely, with the Curse set and the Moringa Berry, Milk Drink to recover, Scarf Incineroar, really helped to like passing shot into and let Miltank survive, and then able to get a late game Slowking Trick Room. And I was lucky because of Lucian obviously quickly realized he had nothing on his team for that Miltank. Right, he brought 2 ice types and Entei, a fire type, and with the help of Moringa on the Miltank, the Raikou couldn't even hit it either. So he's facing down this Miltank that is just bulky with good recovery, And it's not like I'm there stalling with a mill tank. It's just setting up a bit of defenses and offenses with curse set, getting trick room up, and then just rearranging the speed tiers. But Lucian soon realised he didn't have anything for it, and to my disluck, he brought AV Suicune, and with this AV Suicune, he included Sheer Cold as his fourth move. And it's not like I've been running a lot of setup all season, so it was a very disappointing thing to see. That it was like the one thing I didn't want to see is a Sheer Cold Suicune. In game one, I was lucky he did manage to miss the 4 Sheer Colds. I do think that I wasn't too worried about him hitting the fourth one. Like he missed the first 3, and that was me in a good spot then. I could have probably died to the 3rd or the 4th Sheer Cold and still managed to bring the game to a win. But that luck was well, I wouldn't really consider that lucky per se. Sheer Cold is a 20% chance to hit, and he only clicked it 4 times, so that's within the realm of like, oh, okay, it probably would hit the 5th time, Well, we move on to game 2, and yeah, do you want to talk a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So game 2, the Well Lords decided to change up their lead, and they decided to start with their Hell lead, and the Rebellion kind of led a very strong lead into the Hell lead.
Literally the only lead I didn't want to see.
Yeah, with the Choice Scarf Inte and the Mr. Rhyme with Fake Out. And so definitely put a lot of pressure on the Well Lords in that game. First early couple turns, I believe. The both the ice Pokemon only really have one move between the two of them to hit Entei with, and it's the Meteor Beam on the Aurorus. No, not on the Aurorus. On the
yeah, it was Meteor Beam on Aurorus with Power Herb, and
yeah.
I did have Hydro Pump on Arctozolt.
Oh yeah, Hydro Pump. I forgot about it. Yeah, and so you went for the you went for the Meteor Beam. They switched in Raikou, got the one shot on the Raikou basically, and overall was kind of getting a good position, and we're able to kind of overcome the lead. But basically, the Mr. Rhyme had Focus Blast, killed the ice Pokemon pretty quickly, and it got down to the end game where it was Spiritomb and Incineroar versus Suicune and Mr. Rhyme, basically. And yeah, and so Mr. Rhyme was low enough HP where Incineroar had a clean one shot on it. And so basically Matrix went for the went to attack into the Mr. Rhyme. They protected. They went for the attack after they protected. Lucian and Rebellion got a second protect, got the double protect. Then on turn 3, they were able to finally kill the Mr. Rhyme. But after that, Incineroar died, and it kind of came down to a 1v1 with Spiritomb versus Suicune. And Spiritomb was 2 hits away from killing it, and Suicune got a Sheer Cold before the second attack went off.
Yep.
So definitely a little bit sad. If they didn't get the double protect, the Well Lords win. If they miss the second Sheer Cold, they also lose.
If they hadn't got that earlier flinch on my Aurorus with the Entei Iron Head, I also win.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that one. But in the same sense, if at some point, I think at some point you had the opportunity to pull your guys into the Suicune instead of Snarl, and that might have been the difference between winning and losing. But it was an incredibly close match. Game 3, that one was just bad.
Game 3 was. Game 2 was a little bit of bad luck. Like, the game flinched by the Entei when I had done a parting shot into it to lower its attack, so it couldn't go for an Iron Head to KO Aurorus. Freeze Dry would have picked up a lot of damage on the Suicune, and that would have been a perfect position for the end game. Got flinched, fair enough. Spiritomb I admittedly should have gone for the Poltergeist a little bit sooner into the Suicune, but in my mind, I'm thinking Incineroar and Spiritomb can double the Suicune and remove the chance of Sheer Cold getting rid of both of them. But the double protects on Mr. Rhyme, really annoying, and then Sheer Cold hitting on the second attack. I got to accept the fact that he did miss a few in the first game. It was super annoying, but it happens. Game 3, there was just no chance. Like, you say game 2 had bad RNG for me. Game 3 was like plot armor.
Oh yeah. So turn 1, Rebellion was able to get a crit onto the Miltank, which put it low enough HP such that even it likely needed to Milk Drink the following turn. Then turn 2, Rebellion doubled up into Slowking, which was going to set up Trick Room, and the -1 Raikou got a crit, which doubled its damage output, which made it being able from surviving to killing it, preventing them from setting up Trick Room, which would have also put them in an amazing situation. However, that's not the end of it. A couple of turns later, it was Suicune Togetic versus a Miltank at, I think, +1 defense, +1 attack.
It was plus two, maybe +3 on that one.
So it's +2, I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
And the Spiritomb in front of the Suicune. And Wellords predicted that Lucian was going to go for the Sheer Cold and disabled. And so if they didn't hit the Sheer Cold on their first attempt, it would have been disabled for pretty much the rest of the game. And they hit their only Sheer Colds they clicked that game, and it ended up killing. And then the Sheer Colds were disabled. If that was disabled and it never was not able to click for the rest of the game, the Miltank had a very good chance to sweep because the damage output of all the other Pokemon on their team was very minimal into the Miltank at +1 special defense and +2 defense, and with the thick bat. So definitely really sad for you. I'm sorry for your match.
Yeah.
But yeah. On the bright side, you made playoffs.
Yeah. It hurt even more because obviously this was a match for first seed to get that first week bye. Especially with like showing like game 1 had little to no RNG influence. And then we see that game 2 and 3 were as close as they were. Well, game 2 was really close and should have been a win without some RNG influence in the late game. Wherefore, game 3, he had the RNG influence right at the start of the match, like just getting those crits out of the gate. The first crit didn't really matter too much. That was manageable. It was the second one on the Slowking that really hurt, especially when like you spend. It's similar to like on game 2 where I spent a turn to reduce the damage of Entei's Iron Head into Aurora, so I survived, so I could get an attack off, only to flinch. Game 3, I do the same thing, pass a shot onto Raikou, so it reduces the special attack so that Slowking can set Trick Room in front of it and Choice Scarf Entei, so that I can get a Trick Room up because my Slowking is very specially bulky, and I know a Thunderbolt from my modest Raikou is going to do around 30% thereabouts. And I was at half health after the Entei hit me. So I was guaranteed to live there, get Trick Room up, weakness partially activated in front of a scarfed Entei, which was already locked, and a Raikou. Like, with Miltank at full HP, I was going to be in a really good position. I could either predict the switch and recover back up on Slowking, or just go for Muddy Waters just to get damage off. Possibly with Suicune coming in on the Raikou slot, on the Entei slot, which Miltank would be able to pressure. And that would have been a huge point of the game. However, the Trick Room was lost. That's understandable. Okay, fine. Slowking went down. I still had a chance. I still had an out. All I needed to do was just make sure that he didn't hit his first Sheer Cold. And as a player, you can't do anything about that. Like, if you don't have Protect on your set, you cannot stop that from going. You can't. There's nothing you can do. Like, it's a bulky mon. That's the whole point of why it exists on this team. It's like it's there to just take some hits and slowly chip away the opponent's team. Because if Lucian doesn't have the most offensive upfront offense, what he has is a really good bulky offense. So it's not hyper offense in terms of it's going to do big damage for you quickly. No, it's there to absorb hits and dish out medium to high level damage. So then when you've got basically neutralize the offensive pressure from that team, all Lucian was able to do in every single one of those games was click sheer cold. That was his only out in all 3 games. And it just so happens that the very first one he hit, even with me going to try and disable it, he could have switched out Suicune and then reset the disable and stuff like that. But then he's having to switch around. My Miltank's at +3 attack, +3 defense. It's going to be doing damage. It's going to be hard for him to play around. And at least it would have meant that he can't just sit there clicking sheer cold, sheer cold, sheer cold. He would have had to have switched out, brought back in, and the sheer colds would have been a bit more dispersed and give me a little bit more time to actually do something on the board.
Yeah.
However, it was not meant to be. So
yeah, sad match. Not the only match that's been decided by one-hit KO moves, and hopefully it is the last.
Hopefully it's the last.
Hopefully. We'll see. Anyways, continuing on, we have the Trixie Tricos versus the Somerville Scraggies. The first 2 games were really close, and then game 3 kind of ended up being this little bit of a blowout. And I think there was also a disconnect with it.
In game 1, I'm pretty sure he led Ninetales and Shiftry, or Shiftry and Jolteon. In game 1, I think that's what it was. Jolteon and Shiftry was led in game 1, and he went for the Volt Switch or something.
One for the Volt Switch. Ninetales came out, got the Chlorophyll boost. Then the Leaf Blade ended up, I think, getting a 1-shot on turn 1.
So from what I can remember, the Rotom Fan and Dugtrio were led in game 1, possibly threatening like a Disquake type of lead.
Mm-hmm.
But with Jolteon going for a Volt Switch into the Rotom Fan, I remember Otto being unsure whether he protects Rotom Fan. He can't remove the Jolteon, and he just gets a free Earthquake off with a Dugtrio. However, he doesn't go for Protect. I think he went for like a Screen or something. I'm not sure. And Shiftry was able to get a Leaf Blade off into the Dugtrio. The Ninetales came in, obviously, to provide it with this Chlorophyll boost. And then basically Ninetales and Shiftry just proceeded to sweep through the team, getting 2 kills apiece, with Shiftry even able to sucker punch the Alakazam, and proving that it just straight 1-shots.
Well, yeah, that was definitely a big calc that was really relevant going into game 2 and 3, which is Shiftry, or Alakazam is not Focus Sashed, and Sucker Punch from Shiftry 1-shots, and also Alakazam likely doesn't have Protect.
Mm-hmm. Game 2, the Tricos switched up a little bit and brought the Sableye Charizard with Jolteon and Stork, versus the Alakazam Dugtrio, Primarina, and Purloin. And this game, without the Shiftry being present, the Alakazam proved to be quite the threat.
Mm-hmm.
He managed to get 3 KOs with Alakazam against and survived the entire game. I'm not sure if they led Dugtrio Primarina or not, or what. I don't recall the specifics of the match, but I know it ended up being a pretty tight set where just Alakazam and Purloin were left standing for the Scraggies at the end of game 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then game 3, the Tricos opted to go back to their original plan, which was Jolteon, Ninetales, and Shiftry with Charizard again. And this time, some of those Scraggies had Alakazam, Dugtrio, Primarina, and the Shiftry was just eating up those mons with its stab into Alakazam, Dugtrio, and Prim. Sucker punching Alakazam, just removing it off the field, getting the Leaf Blades onto the Dugtrio. It was a pretty clean sweep in game 3, to be honest.
Well, yeah. So I know game 3 ended up coming down to this weird end game where it was Ninetales and Shiftry versus the Dugtrio by itself, and then the Scraggies disconnected. And so the stats on the game were a little bit skewed because we don't quite know if Ninetales would have died, for example.
True.
The Shiftry kind of just pressured every single thing that they brought game 3, with I think it 2 shots Primarina pretty cleanly. And I think Full Switch plus Leap Blade was it killed Primarina, if I recall. The Sucker Punch one shots Alakazam, and Alakazam didn't have Protect, as far as I know. And then the Leaf Blade threatened to one shot the Doug Trio.
But I believe that was the mon that was Focus Sash.
Yeah.
Which is why with the DC, if he had gone for Earthquake, he'd get the KO on the Ninetales, which is what was reported as.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting set. The Alakazam was definitely the kind of the focal piece of both being the biggest offensive threat and also the easiest Pokemon to kill, and so kind of ended up being very much a glass cannon in favor of the Tricos because they got the 2-1
win. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the set?
I felt like it was quite a dominating match for the Tricos, to be honest, and only offset by the fact that they didn't bring Shiftry in game 2.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely think Shiftry was kind of the key, which definitely interesting because it's a mon that doesn't see too much love normally.
Yeah.
Let's continue on. We have the Brisbane Blazikens versus the Sars. The Sars were able to get a 2-0 win against the Blazikens.
Yep.
Any thoughts?
So yeah, the straight away the Sars really put the pressure on with the Selgor. It was another week where Selgor was just really performed well, and what it allowed the Sars to do was create a round tech with a Selgor and Sylveon, making the speed calcs for the Blazikens just all out the window.
Yeah. Oh, and it was really awkward because not the Blazikens had this Choice Scarf Electro Web, and it was lowering the speed of the Excelgor, but its second speed drop ended up activating a Citrus Berry on the Excelgor, activating its Unburden, undoing all the speed drops. And so it ended up being this really awkward where Excelgor never was slow enough to underspeed anything other than the Blaziken's Choice Scarf Mon, even though it was consistently losing its speed by Electroweb. Just the that combination definitely just kind of caught the Blazikens off guard and kind of put them in a very good position. Was game 1 or game 2 the one that came down to a roll?
Game 1 came really close, where I think it was Buzzwole versus Dracovish. I'm not 100% sure, but or Heliolisk versus Dracovish.
Yeah, no, it was that.
And the Dracovish literally lived on like 1 HP, 2 HP. Again, this is another example of Blazikens just failing to just pick up the KO, and that was huge because if they had picked up the KO there, they'd win that first game.
But so after getting I think 2 kills with the round Selgar strategy, eventually the Electro Webs did enough damage and the Buzzwole did enough damage to kind of kill those Pokemon they brought out the Dracovish, and the Dracovish getting its speed lower was able to take a little bit of damage, but not quite enough, and then was able to basically survive on pretty much 1 HP. And then game 2 was not nearly as close, if I recall.
Yeah, it was a pretty strong outing for the Swords in game 2. The Mamoswine was brought this time, and it just wasn't getting nearly as much damage as it needed to do. And I believe like Dualodon's special defense wasn't enough for the rounds.
Yeah, because I think they ended up switching in turn 1 onto a Hyper Voice on the Sylveon, and even though it was AV and only took neutral damage, I think it ended up doing over 50%, and then it was in this awkward situation where it's like, okay, my answer to Sylveon almost got 1 shot by, or is going to get 2 shot by Sylveon basically.
Yeah,
but I think definitely I think the lead ended up not being favorable for the Blazikens, and the switch in damaged them greatly, and ended up kind of putting them in a situation where they couldn't really recover.
Mm-hmm. In addition to that, the Buzzwole got nerfed from Baby Doll Eyes on Sylveon. Like the South Chronosaurus just really put the Blazikens in a bit of a headlock, to be honest, where they just weren't getting any damage output, and the Mons weren't surviving long enough to get any damage out.
Yeah, except for the Helios game one, which somehow survived.
Yeah, no,
Pretty
Helios
much.
survived.
It started off turn one and it never left the field and was the last Pokemon to die. But yeah. Anyways, I don't know. So
Well,
that's
that game, I was just gonna say that game marked the 7th loss in a row for the Blazikens, which is unfortunate. Really hoping that they could take at least one win before the season ends out.
yeah.
But that nice crisp 2-0 win for the Sars really puts them in a good position heading on to the final week. So
Yeah, definitely have a very good chance to make playoffs. But with that, we can move on to the Pogging Portugons versus the Beantown Binacles, in which the Pogging Portugons were able to get a solid 2-0 win.
Bronzong.
Yeah, the Bronzong. the Bronzong was pretty annoying with the situation of whether or not they should set up Trick Room. It was kind of this awkward game where both teams kind of had a good Trick mode and good Trick Room Pokemon, and they I think they ended up never setting up Trick Room on either side.
Neither really wanted to set Trick Room up for the other.
Yeah, exactly. And the Vikavolt ended up doing pretty huge chunks of damage, and I definitely thought it was going to get there at some points, because
it just never seemed to get the kill.
Yeah, it just kept on getting short on the kills with the Bug Buzz into the Bronzong doing huge chunks of damage. The Blastoise being Wakanberry, I think, ended up making it let it survive. And so the game was definitely kind of a back and forth and the entire time. The Bronzong, I think, was a lot more seemed like it was more offensive invested than it normally was. And so it actually did some pretty good damage output, and it didn't seem to have as many support moves because I think it ended up revealing 3 attacking moves. Any thoughts? I'm kind of rambling. My bad.
Yeah, it's fine. No, I this is the only match I haven't actually managed to catch, so I'm kind of just going off what the statistics say. But like it says that round one, at least game one, the Vikavolt, none of the Mons on the Theo side managed to get KO from the Slowbro, which must have just chipped enough into Blastoise, which didn't want to die. The Bronzong seems to be quite oppressive on the offensive side, possibly just surviving hits and chipping at the Theo's team. And then game two, the Sylvalis, the Porygons decided to just bring the exact same 4 Mons. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Wherefore, the Theo and his Spanicles decided to switch up a little bit and bring Heatran, Darmanitan, Galar, and then Hitmonchan and Vikavolt as well. Galarian Darmanitan seems to have picked up 2 KOs through the match against both Bronzong and Blastoise, so possibly targeting down that Bronzong a bit more, maybe running Flare Blitz. I'm not 100% sure.
So it wasn't Flare Blitz. I think the Darmanitan mainly just killed Rock Slide.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. And it got some flinches and just it did pretty good damage output into a couple of Mons. And yeah, the Heran, I think, ended up, I don't know, Heran, every time I see it, it just keeps on, it always dies a lot easier than I feel like it should. To like not to non-ground moves. Like obviously it dies to ground moves, but it died pretty quickly, or pretty, like I think it got one shot if I recall correctly.
Oh wow.
From an Urshifu close combat, I think.
Well, it is a close combat. That's pretty strong.
But yeah,
to be fair.
Well, yeah, that's fair. But yeah. So, anyways, but game 2 ended up being pretty close, if I recall. Game 1 was not quite as close, but definitely a good showing of the Porygons. The Porygons have definitely showed, has definitely strived how good they've been doing this season. They had a tough season last season and kind of came out down squeaking this season.
That's true.
Any other thoughts on the match, or should we move on?
I've got none. I believe we also have a third partner joining us right now.
Oh.
Are you there, Miss Mag?
Hello, surprise! I am here.
Have you got any thoughts on the final closing thoughts on the match between the Porygons and the Barnacles?
I do, because I just watched this match yesterday, seeing as I am the Porygon's last opponent, and I will be facing them in a few hours. So one of the things I will say that was really unfortunate for Theo in this matchup is the pledge stuff just really put him in an awkward spot where, like, he doesn't want to set Trick Room for an obvious Bronzong to potentially sweep and be annoying, but OC Frey is able to actually control his fast mode with the Tailwind by just setting the Swamp through the Grass Pledge. So he was kind of really in a bind that game one, and I don't think he figured out a way like in between that middle ground. So that's kind of why game one kind of went the way it did. Game two was definitely a lot more close. I just think the really offense. I think the Bronzong was Assault Vest actually. It had 4 attacking moves, if I recall. I think that kind of just threw him for a little bit of a loop, and the Porygons overall just kind of played better to that 2-0 out. But yeah,
Nice.
good match.
Nice.
Yeah, I guess with that we can move on to the next match, which didn't actually happen, which is the Bolton Bashers and the Georgia Gurchins. However, we have some sad news for anyone who's not in the Discord. The Georgia Gurchins are not going to be competing for the rest of the season. They had some stuff that kind of prevented them from playing for the next week or so, two, and so they kind of decided to drop off. And we have a new coach. And the new coach is the Scissors, or the new coach. The team is the Scissors.
Yeah, the Summersville Scissors, coached by Night Owl, who is taking over and will be playing the makeup match with Bolton Bashers as well as the Week 8 game from here on out.
Yeah, and so good luck to them. Sorry to hear the Gurchins can continue on, because Zam was a great coach and they had a really good chance to make playoffs, but hopefully the replacement can also do well with their team.
Mm-hmm. Instead, we move on now to the Tyrannotata Horses versus the Drowsy Dracozols.
So we'll start with Miss Mag, because they just got here. Any thoughts on this match?
Yes, I think this was a match that showed how much offensive potential is sort of hidden on Saki and the Tyrannotata Sauce's draft. Naganadel did more than its share of the work, and having that focus sash really set the Dracozols back a bit. But I also want to just respect how close really the match was, even for being a 2-0. It just really came down to positioning that Naganadel really correctly so that it could take out a lot of Masenko's threats.
Well, yeah, I think one of the big things is the lack of Akaberry on the Ferrothorn ended up being a really big detriment to the Dracozolt side. I think if they had Akaberry, they almost certainly win game 2, but they might have even been able to squeak out both of the games. I definitely think that ended up hurting them greatly. But other than that, I definitely think that the Gonadol, which is a Pokemon I drafted before, just did so much work into the Mr. Mime, into the Ferrothorn, and even did reasonable into, like, Pokemon that doesn't seem like it should be necessarily favored with, or maybe more neutral. But yeah, any thoughts from you, Matrix?
The Scarf Mr. Mime was a really good bring by the Drowsy Dracozols, which was really tough because they tricked away the Scarf turn 1 into the Cresselia, which was a really good trick because the Cresselia went for setup. But then later on in the game, the Mr. Mime was really missing that Scarf to be able to deal with the Naganadel, because Mr. Mime is obviously threatened by Nag, but it also returned Oko as the Nag, especially with the side shock. So with it being slower now, it was really hard for the Mime. It was really hard for the Dracozols to really get rid of the Naganadel. So just being slower, especially with that focus sash, each time, it just really hurt the Dracozols.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact situation, but I feel like in game 2 there was a switch out on the Dracozolt side that ended up.
Oh, that was game 1.
Game 1. That was game 1.
Game 1, he had the Ferrothorn out versus the Machamp. No, not Ferrothorn. He had Rotom Wash and Mr. Mime versus Cresselia and Machamp. and he tricked the Cresselia, swapped Rotom Wash out, and swapped in Ferrothorn, and the Machamp got a big old dynamic punch off into Ferrothorn.
Yeah, and that switch out definitely ended up punishing them greatly, and I think was one of the big things that kind of switched the game back in the Sars' favor.
Yeah. It would have actually been interesting if the Rotom Wash was carrying Will-O-Wisp there. I feel like it would have been such a. I don't think it was. But if it had been, it would have been such a good position for the Dracozols.
Yeah.
Although risky with Machamp possibly running cuts. So
yeah, well, yeah, that's fair, but especially when you see dynamic punch, you assume that's going to be no guard after that at that point.
yeah.
So
really unfortunate for the Dracozols. It ended their playoff dreams.
Yeah. With that, I guess we can continue on unless y'all have anything else.
Nah, I'm good.
All right. We have the Coffee and Smokers versus the MK Mimikyus, where the Coffee and Smokers were beat 0-2, or Mimikyus 2-0. I'll let either of y'all start if y'all want.
I'll let Miss Mike start, but I believe this was the game for Ice Cube.
Yes.
This was the game for Ice Cube. The Ice Cubes that the Mimikyus just picked up. It was definitely a really good showing from both sides. I think the Smokers had some really awesome techs. They had the Iron Ball Talonflame to capitalize on the Psychic Terrain in case any of the Mimikyu's mons went for Fake Out to stop any priority coming out there. I thought that was really good. The problem I found for this team in this matchup was they were very heavy on physical attackers, and that's one of the things that Ice Cube enjoys facing because of the Ice Face ability, where it basically just eats a physical hit and then it becomes super fast. And it really had Gardevoir shouldering so much work in that matchup, and I don't think it was able to keep up, really.
Oh yeah, I remember the Iron Ball was like a cool tech in theory, but I think it ended up backfiring a little bit because the Scarf Crocodile on the Mimikyu side ended up outspeeding Talonflame in Tailwind, and that definitely hurt it greatly. One of the turns because it was unable to get like a Flare Blitz off, or I think it clicked Flare Blitz. I wasn't sure. I can't remember the exact move it clicked, but I remember that ended up being really awkward for him game one. Game two, we got the clean Ice Cube, not sweep, but it was able to set up Belly Drum, and with Ice Face, it was able to outspeed, but it didn't even need the Ice Face because what ended up basically happening was it was able to kind of the Smokers kind of avoided it with everyone other than the Gardevoir because they didn't want to give it the speed boost.
Yeah, they didn't want to break the Ice Face. Yeah.
And then apparently game two came down to a roll, which was a 50-50 roll on a expanding force in Psychic Terrain. And and I think the Ice Cube ended up living on 10-ish HP. And then after that, the Gardevoir died, and they only had physical attackers left, and the game was pretty much over because Ice Cube could one-shot anything, and the physical attackers couldn't kill it because of Ice Face.
Wow. Impressive. Good. A lot of work put in by Ice Cube then.
Oh yeah, no, definitely a lot of work put in by Ice Cube. Gardevoir looked really good though. I believe it was Scarf Gardevoir, and it did a lot of work, but not quite enough to deal with that Ice Cube. Any other thoughts before we move on, y'all?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. Oh, actually, I lied. There's one other thing. There was a point during game one where the Gardevoir, I think it went for an expanding force and the Crocodile switched in, and I think that if he had potentially, the Smokers read that with a more neutral play of Dazzling Gleam, they could have got enough chip on the Crocodile, I think, to actually take the first game, despite all the mix-ups.
Oh yes, I remember that, and I agree that because I believe the Gyarados actually ended up killing the partner Pokemon, and the Crocodile switched in, and so the Expanding Force ended up dealing actually 0 damage because the Crocodile was the only thing alive at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just completely a wasted attack, and then I think it was forced to switch out the following turn because of the Crocodile, basically.
Yep.
So, anyways, I guess continuing on, we have the Old English Ice Cubes versus the Tyndall Med Metals. This is another match that didn't occur because the Ice Cubes were out of town, out of country. I don't know exactly how far they went.
They are vacating. They're on vacation.
Yeah, and so that should hopefully happen soon, and we'll talk about it in next week's power rankings. But definitely a very interesting match and very important to playoffs because both of these teams have chances to playoffs if they win. But if they lose, they can't make playoffs, and so it's a really big match for both of them. Anyways, continuing on, we have the final match, which is the live premiere, which was the Cambridge Camera-Ups versus the Hulissapod Warriors. Miss Mag, do you want to start, or should I?
You can start. I've started the last two.
All right, so this was a very interesting match. It was really close game 1 and 3. Game 2 was not particularly close. Was not super close. I think it ended up actually being a 4-0. So I'm going to start at game 2 because it was what?
Correct.
Yeah. So I'll start at game 2 because it ended up being, I'd say, a little bit strange. So the basically turn 1, the Warriors ended up shadowballing into the Gotharita, and ended up going for a Will-O-Wisp into an Araquanid. The Araquanid's water bubble prevents it from getting burned, and the Gotharita survived the Shadow Ball, and got up Trick Room, and then basically Trick Room sweep. That's what happened. Araquanid, I think, one shot almost everything on the pretty much everything on the Warrior side except for actually no, I think it just one shot everything on their side if I recall. I'm trying to think, like I know it one shot the Tornadus, I know it one shots the Rotom, I know it one shots the oh my gosh, the Ghost Frostlass. So yeah, I think it just one shot could have one shot everything. I don't think it did. I think they switched in the Rhydon, and the Rhydon got some kills. But yeah, basically they got a Trick Room. They got Trick Room set up, Trick Room sweep. That's what happened game 1. Game 2, I mean. Game 3, I don't know. I'm sorry I'm going out of order, but these are just how my ideas go. Game 3, the the Warriors brought their Regidrago. And Regidrago did a lot of work. The Camera-Ups didn't bring their Ferrymon game 2 or 3, and so Dragon Energy was just really clean, and so they just led with their Rotom and their Regidrago, and Regidrago just did massive chunks of damage with Dragon Energy. The Araquanid didn't have Wide Guard this week, and so it was pretty clean. And it just kind of became the Warriors' positioning, making sure Regidrago can get kills. And it dominated game 3. And there wasn't really much they could do because the Camera-Ups couldn't set up Trick Room. And then the Regidrago outsped everything and did massive chunks of damage. And then game 1, going back to game 1, I remember the oh my gosh, the electric mouse. Dedenne did a lot of work for them with Scarf Dedenne with Volt Switch did massive damage into the Tornadus, and it had Electro Web, which was really annoying and ended up making the game really close. Yeah, I know. Anyway, so those are kind of some of the things that happened and some of the ideas. I think it was really well played on both sides, except for the trying to burn the Araquanid on turn 2, or game 2, which kind of made that into a blowout. So I'll pass it to Miss Mag. Any thoughts?
Yeah, this was a really good premiere. Also just given the coaches' histories, was basically a rematch of the finals last season in the Searing Shot division. Both of these guys made it there, and unfortunately for the Camera-Ups, yielded the same result. Rex kind of winning again. But it really came down to like just not having the wide guard prep. Like you gotta respect the Reggie Drago. Like no matter what, you gotta have at least some kind of answer for it, whether it be a fairy or a wide guard mon. You need something, and I think that's really what their downfall was, because I think for the most part their game plan going into this match outside of that was very solid. Um, that was probably like my biggest thing. And they even admitted that because Rex is actually trading his spoilers, he's trading his Reggie Drago out for the last week before playoffs, that they didn't prep as hard for it. So I think that was just a misstep overall on their part.
So any thoughts, Matrix?
No, it's one of the matches I've never actually managed to finish watching, so you guys have filled me in pretty well on it.
Well, yeah, it's definitely a fun match. I was talking to Rex during the match, and they gave me a little bit of insight, but it was definitely a fun match, and it was pretty close. Well, it was pretty back and forth. There's definitely positions in which it seemed like both teams could have gotten there, but the camera ups decided not to bring the Dedende game 3, and the Warriors kind of leaning on Reggie Drago kind of ended up being the deciding factor there.
Well, the live premiere lived up to hype.
Yeah. I guess with that, we can move on to the official rankings. Starting at number 24, we have the Brisbane Blazikens. Pretty straightforward. They have yet to win, so we couldn't really give them too much of higher than 24th. I guess we can move on. Number 23, we have the Tindo Melmetals. They didn't battle this week, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're a little bit low. Any thoughts on maybe their match that didn't occur? Who you got?
They're playing
Ice Cubes.
The Ice Cubes, aren't they? It's a tough one to call because the Ice Cubes are lacking a little bit in general motivation, I'd say. Wherefore the Tendo Male Metals are still pretty hyped up to try and fight their way to get that playoff position. So possibly if there's a lack of prep or enthusiasm to prep it on one side, especially with the Ice Cubes being away on holiday and having to cram in 2 matches when they get back, I could possibly see the Mel Metals actually winning that game.
Well, if that's the case, we might have underranked them, but sorry, Kirky. It's hard to rank a team that skip when they skip a week. I guess we can move on. Number 22, we have the Beantown Binacles. Miss Mac, any thoughts on them at this rank or their week's match?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately for Theo, it's another 0-2 to nail in the coffin, his chances of not getting playoffs. But I really think his team is good, but kind of like, we were talking about with Gert and the Ice Cubes, maybe something, keeping him busy, keeping him from, prepping as much might have had a toll on how he's been playing this season. Because I think his team's really solid. And, there's definitely some outs that he could have played to a little bit better, but yeah, gotta rank him this low just because of that.
Fair enough. I guess we can move up to number 21, which is the Coffee and Smokers. Matrix, any thoughts on them here, or their team in general?
Well, I mean, they've only got 2 wins this season so far. One is through the Sea King, and then I don't remember what the other win was this season. They've just been falling a little bit short each week. They've had some good sets and had some good games, but they're just not hitting the mark.
Well, yeah, they've had some really spicy tech. I've been really enjoying a lot of their sets they brought. And
the Monstrosity, that was a nice one.
Yeah, and they've had a couple like that, but I feel like what keeps on happening is that their cool tech kind of gets them one game, and they keep on just getting a little bit short of getting that second game. And so maybe they need a little bit more spicy tech, or maybe they need to be a little bit more consistent. I'm not sure which, but definitely a little bit sad, and hopefully can get their third win of the season and get a nice 3-5 win, or 3-5 record. I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Continue on, we go number 20, which is the Drowsy Dracosolts. So Miss Mag, any thoughts on them?
Yeah, I gotta say that, again, we've seen this team comp from very earlier in the season where, Masenko used his trades. I think he's enjoying playing it a little bit more than what he started with. But at the same time, it's like with the Smokers, it's just you get that one game, and then it's just not coming through for the second to pull the best 2 out of 3. Really.
Matrix?
Yeah, I feel like the second half of the season they've actually had some better games. Possibly starting off with the one where they beat me in. Um, they've definitely had some uh, more solid prep. Like this last week was pretty good. It just fell short to literally undone by a focus sash on the one mob. And yeah, no, they've been doing really well. But the team does overall lack a bit of offensive pressure and requires a lot of setup. And if the team he's going against has answers around that setup or is able to just bypass it altogether, then they've just not been able to make adjustments on the fly.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully, we'll see how they go. Hopefully they don't win next week because that's against me. But anyways, continuing on, we have number 19, which is the Rolled Gold Pretzels. They had a really close loss this week, and they're a little bit higher on the 2-5s. Any thoughts on them?
Man, Gooby, I needed you to win. I needed you to win so we could have like a 5-way tie for second in Sapphire, which would have made it just so much more entertaining. But overall, like, I mean, taking into account Gumi's history, like as a coach and the team, this is not his finest work. But at the same time, I think part of it is some of the team members might need a little bit of changing, which, I think the Azelf that he added to the team has actually been doing a lot of good work, and he's been leaning more on that Sharpedo he loves so much. But it really just comes down to like falling short. Like he literally lost this last week's match because he forgot to EV a couple of mons. So it's just those little missteps really just kind of adding up over time.
Yeah. No, I also wanted them to win. They would have helped me a lot with my playoff hopes too. Because continuing on, we have number 18, which is Somerville Scraggies. Any thoughts on them, Matrix?
They've been doing surprisingly all right set wise. Like they've been taking a lot of games to a third game, and like they've got a really interesting team. They started off pretty strong in reality. They were 2-1 by the third week, and then they managed to just basically just trail off in the latter half of the season with loss after loss. Um, I don't know if that's the case of Scraggy's just not having enough time to fully prep for the teams or what, but just being caught out here and there, like the Alakazam just getting caught out all the time. That sucker punch this last week. I don't know.
I definitely feel like a couple of their sets could have been won if they had protectors on some of their mons, and maybe that might be the big difference of some of these sets. But definitely, I would say some really close ones. Continuing on, we have the Old English Ice Cubes, who are 2-4. Their match was skipped, but for some reason they're pretty high compared to the Melmetals. Not sure why, but we rank them here.
I think in general, most of his games have been pretty close, really. I know the Ice Cubes haven't felt that themselves, but I overall prefer their team to the Melmetals. And I feel like if they were both playing, if the Ice Cubes were playing with the intention to win out, I think without a doubt the Ice Cubes have got a solid chance of beating the Melmetals and finishing off 4-4, which is why I personally rank them higher. Like if you just look at the record of the team, how they've been playing, and the player themselves, and not taking into account how I feel they might play in a future match.
Mm-hmm.
I'm inclined to agree, actually, except with what Matrix said. Except I will also throw in. I just think their team comp relative to their, I guess, current opponent, the Melmetals, is just better overall. I feel like it gives him more access to doing things, whereas like all of us on this call have pretty much said we haven't seen a lot out of the Weezing Gigas mode all season long, except for I think maybe one game, I think, versus Dan, where like it really kind of popped off a little bit. I might be remembering that wrong.
Yeah,
But I think
it was
those
Gigas by itself, I think.
Oh, I mean, hey, that's even better. But I think overall, like the Ice Cubes have a long standing and strong standing, and I think, like Matrix said, if they can get it together, definitely 4-4 going to playoffs can see it.
Continuing on, we have number 16, which is you after your really big win and overall having a lot of close matches this season.
Well, it's finally nice to break 20 on the PRs. That was a goal of mine. I didn't think I would get there by week 7, but here we are. All I gotta really say is this has been a very fun team to pilot. It's been a very high skill cap team to pilot. Although adding Metagross on this team has made it a lot better because Metagross is kind of like a really strong mon to just lean on, and I'm very comfortable using it. As you might have seen my match, I used special Metagross this week, and it very much paid off. But it was still a very close 2-0. Like, I can't say that was the most convincing 2-0 I've ever had. Like, literally down to like slivers of hit points. So
yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, personally, the reason why I ranked you a lot higher, like this is probably the highest I've ranked you all season, was because it was actually a pretty good win against a high ranked player, or supposedly high ranked player. And I think now with the Metagross on the team, I kind of like the overall team composition a little bit more, which is weird. I know it's just one mon change from Stack Attack to Metagross, but I don't know. I feel like it fills in that niche you're just missing, and yeah, you've had some really close matches all season. So who knows? You could easily win out and get the final week's win, get you that 3-5. So.
Continuing on, we have number 15, the MK Mimikyu, who had a really big win this week with the Ice Q that they just picked up. I think it's pretty reasonable why they're as high as they are. With their 3-4 though. So,
yeah, I will say that I like the trades. I like some of the trades that they made for sure. I think the Ice Cube was a very good one. It pairs very nicely with that Blaziken and just gives Indeedee more fuel to kind of work with because you could redirect away from the belly drum, or you could redirect away from the speed boost, or from just Trick Room going up in general, and then you also have that Slurpuff. So, the team leans a little bit heavily more focused around Indeedee, but I can't see that as being a bad thing going into playoffs.
Hello, I am back, and I am just by myself. Sorry, I had to end the group call a little bit early, but now I'll finish this up, just me. Continuing on, we have number 14, which is myself. I had a pretty close loss to the leader of my division. So it's one of the reasons I'm one of the higher 3-4 teams. In addition to that, I dropped Goldbat for Delibird. I don't know if it's going to be too impactful of a pickup. However, Goldbat didn't seem to be doing too much since I ended up picking up Crobat, which kind of fills the same role. And so it'll be very unlikely I'd bring both during the same game. Continuing on, number 13 is the Bulky Dragons, who are 3-4 as well with -1 instead of -2 like me, and they beat me in the head-to-head, which is one of the reasons why they're a little bit above myself. In addition to that, however, they did have a pretty tough loss, which put them in a very good position from a very good position to make playoffs to now having to fight a little bit for it. Continuing on, we have number 12, which is the Georgians, who are 3-3+0. And this is higher than all the 3-4 teams. However, as we previously mentioned, the Georgians are no longer going to be playing, and they will be the Somerville Scissors. The Scissors have made a couple of trades. I have not changed them on the slides, but I believe that they dropped Pincurchin and Emolga, if I recall correctly. But I'm not exactly sure what they dropped for. Continuing on, we have number 11, which is the first 4-3 team. Arcanines had a very small victory. It was really close. In addition to that, they're at 4-3 -1, so it makes sense that they're kind of one of the lower 4-3 teams. However, their new pickups of Indeedee and Blacephalon did a lot of work with them. Oh, and even Passimian. All three of those new pickups ended up doing a lot of work for them in their win against the Rolled Gold Pretzels. Continuing on to number 10, we have the South Croydon Sars. The Sars had a really nice 2-0 win, and this kind of makes them a very good position at 4-3+3. In addition to that, they dropped Exploud for Type Null, which I personally think is a really nice pickup. Exploud is not the most impressive Pokemon, but Type Null is very powerful. It's His damage output isn't the greatest, but it does get Sword Stance, and with Eevee, it is one of the bulkiest Pokemons in the game. And the Sars kind of have been infamous for having very bulky and grindy matches, and Type Null is definitely the type of Pokemon that fits in that strategy well. Continuing on to number 9, we have the Trixie Tricos. Tricos also had a nice 2-1 win. They're at 4-3+3, and so they're in pretty good shape to make playoffs. In addition to that, they had one of the higher ranked overall teams, and they definitely had a pretty good performance as well as being a reigning champion. Continuing on to number 8, we have the Bolton Bashers. The Bolton Bashers did not play, however, they are at 4-2+5, which is an absurd differential. They are, despite having not played 2 games, they are very close to having locked up a playoff spot, and they have had very commanding victories and very close losses to good teams. So no surprise that they're so high, in addition to them being the reigning champion. Continuing on to number 7, we have the Tyranitar Sauces. Tyranitar Sauces had a really nice win streak to start off the season. They had a little bit of a 2-game losing streak, and since then, they're trying to bounce back with this last week's win. A lot of people have liked their teams, and they've been playing very well. And in addition to that, they have lost to really good teams. Definitely a good 5-2 team, but not the best. Continue on, we have number 6, which is the Cambridge Camerups. The Camerups had the really close locks to Rex. Their nemesis, I guess, at this point. In addition, they dropped their Como for Drampa. I think that's a good pickup. They have been very Trick Room leaning this entire season, and Drampa's a lot better for Trick Room on. In addition to it, the 4x weakness is always a little bit annoying for Como, especially because it's more of a defensive mon. And Drampa is just a really good damage output. And in addition to that, it's a good switch in for the Gothorita and a good switch in for the Chandelure and things like that. Anyways, continue on. We have number 5, which is the Hulissapod Warriors. The Warriors are just one spot above the Camerups. Makes sense since they beat them, and they have the same differential of 5-2+4. However, the Warriors ended up making 2 trades. They dropped the Regidrago for Tapu Lele, and they picked up Reuniclus, and I can't remember what they dropped for it. So it's definitely interesting. So this gives them an actual Trick Room setter, which they haven't had for a little bit of time, and which I think definitely helps them because they do have some slower Pokemon, namely Marowak, Aggron, and now the Reuniclus. In addition, it gives them a pretty powerful terrain mode in Reuniclus and Tapu Lele. And I think Tapu Lele, though a very different mon, fills the Regidrago pretty well, which is a big damage output on a reasonably bulky mon that's not particularly fast. Obviously, the downside with Tapu Lele is not super physically defensive. However, they do already have some very good defensive walls, namely in Aggron. And they also have Intimidate on the Mawile. Continuing on, number 4, we have the Rebellion, who is 6-1+9. Rebellion is in very good position to end as the regular season champ. However, it looks like a lot of people in the council ranked them a little bit lower because they were not convinced of this week's win against the Matrix and the Welsh Wailords. And so they end up being 4, despite last week having been 1 and winning. So definitely a little bit difference, but the power rankings are a little bit at predicting how well we think the team will perform in a general situation. And they have back-to-back weeks in which they kind of feel like they cheesed out wins because of one-hit KO moves that were 20% accurate. Continuing on, we have the Welsh Wailords, who are the team that Rebellion ended up beating, and it was 5-2. The Wailords are the highest 5-2 team. Kind of the same idea as Lucian and Rebellion in the aspect of they're a little bit higher ranked because we think that they showed an ability to beat Rebellion, which is one of the better teams, with their team, and they kind of ended up getting a little bit of bad luck. Continuing on, we have number 5, which is the Pogging Porygons. Pogging Porygons are 6-1+7, so they have a really good differential. They're one of the teams vying for the regular season championship. And in addition to that, they've had some very impressive wins. And their team, though being ranked one of the lowers in the beginning of the regular season, has shown a lot of strength, namely in its Bronzong, Blastoise, and Urshifu core. Continuing on to number 1 is the Baltimore Pangorials, who are also 6-1.7, and they had a very close win against me. I definitely think that the 1 and 2 team are very close to each other, but I think the fact that people like the Pangorials team a little bit better on average kind of gets them the edge in this, because I think both of those teams have been performing both about equally as well. So in the end, here is our overall rankings. Hopefully y'all are happy with your position right now, or you can hopefully get a win and maybe bump up a little bit. Definitely a pretty tight back, and a lot of teams are still viable for playoffs. And so I wish anyone who's playing a chance to get your chance to playoffs, or a chance to get maybe your third win and ending off on a good high note, if not making playoffs. And so hopefully y'all enjoyed, and thank you all for watching.